I never imagined that my life would change the way it did. Growing up, I was always told that success was reserved for the lucky, the privileged, and those who had the right connections. But I wasn't born into a world where wealth was guaranteed. My story begins with the humblest of beginnings, being raised in a small, modest town. We didn't have much, but we had what mattered most: love, family, and the belief that nothing was impossible if you put your heart into it. I had always been a dreamer, looking up to the successful people in the world, wondering if I would ever be able to do what they did, build something from nothing. It was during these years that I realized one simple truth: opportunity doesn't always knock when you expect it. Sometimes it comes disguised in the most unlikely forms. At the time, I worked as a maid for a wealthy family in the city. I never felt embarrassed about my job. In fact, I took great pride in it. But there was something about the grand houses, the polished floors, and the lifestyles of the families I worked for that made me want more. I began to observe, learn, and think, what if I could one day have a life like this, but on my own terms? My journey into the world of self-made wealth didn't begin with a grand business idea. It didn't begin with venture capital or a mentor. It started with a game of chess. It was a Saturday afternoon when the family I worked for had a small get-together. As usual, I was busy tidying up, trying to stay unnoticed while the guests gathered. I'd always admired the family's guests from a distance: successful businessmen, lawyers, and entrepreneurs. But on this day, something different happened. One of the guests, a well-known millionaire in the city, walked up to me with a smile. "Hey, you," he said, his eyes gleaming with a sense of mischief. "Ever played chess?" I shook my head. "No, but I've always wanted to learn. How about a game?" He challenged, nodding toward the chessboard. "Let's see if you have the brains to handle it." I was taken aback. It felt like a joke after all. I was just the maid. But something in his tone made me curious. I agreed. They all gathered around the table, watching as I sat down and awkwardly set up the pieces. There was an air of condescension in their laughter. They thought it would be a simple game, with me likely surrendering within minutes. But little did they know, I wasn't going to back down. As the game began, I quickly picked up on the moves and patterns. I had an analytical mind, and I could see how the pieces interacted with each other like pieces of a puzzle. The more I played, the more my confidence grew. Then came the moment when I made my first move, an unexpected one that left everyone around the table silent. I had advanced my queen early, a risky yet calculated move that took everyone by surprise. Stared at the board in disbelief, and then, one by one, they began to question my strategy. What had seemed like an impulsive decision was actually a stroke of brilliance. I could sense the shift in the atmosphere. The condescension was gone. Replaced by genuine curiosity, I had shocked them. I was no longer the maid. They were beginning to see me as someone who could hold her own. The atmosphere shifted that day. No longer did I feel like just the maid, though. I knew I still had my role to play in the house. But something inside me had changed. That chessboard wasn't just a game to me anymore. It became a symbol, a metaphor for life. Every move, every choice had consequences, and I began to realize that I could strategize my life, just like I had done in that moment on the chessboard. The millionaire who had invited me to play chess was impressed by my unexpected move. He couldn't quite figure me out. Neither could the others. After the game, he lingered for a moment before approaching me again. "You have a sharp mind," he said with a genuine tone, no longer condescending. "Ever thought about using that for something more than chess?" His words struck me like a lightning bolt. Here I was, a maid in his house, and he was suggesting I could do more. My mind raced. I had never considered myself capable of achieving anything beyond my current life. I had always been content with the simplicity of my job. But this opportunity felt like a door had cracked open and I could see the light on the other side. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. I stayed up late, replaying the game in my head, analyzing every move. As I reflected on it, I realized that the moves I made in life were just like the moves in chess. Each decision, no matter how small, could impact my future. And I was ready to make a bold move. The next morning, I decided to take action. I approached the millionaire with an idea. It was risky, but I had learned something: that day success didn't come to those who waited. It came to those who made bold moves. "Sir," I began, with more confidence than I had ever mustered before, "I want to learn more. I want to work for myself. I want to build something." His eyes widened, surprised by my directness. But instead of dismissing me, he listened. He saw something in me that I hadn't even seen in myself. Potential. He agreed to mentor me, giving me resources and advice. The first piece of advice he gave me was to invest in knowledge. "Books," he said, "are your gateway to understanding the world. Invest in learning and you'll never be poor." With that, he handed me a stack of books on entrepreneurship, finance, and business strategy. "Start reading. And remember, the world will not give you anything for free. You need to earn it, and you'll have to work harder than anyone else." I started small. I devoured the books he had given me, learning about investments, wealth-building strategies, and the power of compound interest. I spent hours every day studying, pushing myself beyond my comfort zone. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, and there were nights when I doubted myself. But with each page I turned, I could feel myself becoming a different person, a person who wasn't just dreaming of a better life but was actively working towards it. I took on small side projects, helping people with their finances, offering advice on investments, and slowly building my network. I wasn't looking to become an instant millionaire. I knew that success wasn't an overnight affair, but I had learned the value of strategy, hard work, and patience. The first significant decision I made was to invest in the stock market. I didn't have much money to start with, but I did have my knowledge. I researched, studied market trends, and made calculated decisions. My first few investments were modest, but over time, they grew. I could feel the momentum building, but it wasn't just about money. It was about mindset, about understanding that success is not given to you. It's earned through effort, perseverance, and calculated risks. With every challenge I faced, I grew stronger. I realized that the only limits to my success were the ones I imposed on myself. As the months passed, I found myself stepping deeper into the world of business. My days were no longer filled with simple chores and routines. I was managing multiple side projects, meeting influential people, and gradually growing my network. The work was grueling, but it was starting to pay off. The more I immersed myself in the world of business and investments, the more I understood that the path to success wasn't a straight line. It was a series of risks, setbacks, and triumphs, all interwoven. But it was these very challenges that shaped me. Each failure, each moment of doubt, became a lesson, a stepping stone on the road to success. One particular decision I remember vividly was when I chose to invest in a startup. It was risky, and the market at the time was volatile, but something about this company caught my eye. They were in the tech industry, a field I had only recently started exploring. The idea seemed promising, but the business model was still in its infancy. The startup was looking for investors, and the founders were passionate, but they lacked the experience that I had been learning about. My instincts told me this was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I decided to take the plunge and invest what little savings I had accumulated. It wasn't a large sum, but it was enough to show my commitment to the founders and the business. The startup's founders were hesitant at first. They were used to dealing with wealthy investors who had millions to spare. But I offered something they didn't have, a fresh perspective, a genuine desire to help them succeed, and a strategic mind honed from years of learning. We worked closely together, building out a business plan, refining their pitch to investors, and creating a roadmap for growth. There were sleepless nights, long hours, and moments of frustration when things didn't seem to be moving fast enough. But with every hurdle we overcame, I felt more certain that I was on the right path. We secured additional investments, expanded the team, and soon, the company began to grow rapidly. I knew that the startup wasn't just about the money, it was about creating something that mattered. We were building a product that had the potential to change lives, and that, to me, was the greatest reward. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. As the startup gained traction, I found myself in situations that tested my decision-making skills. One such moment came when we were faced with a major financial setback. A key investor pulled out at the last minute, leaving us scrambling for funds to keep the business afloat. The pressure was intense. The team looked to me for guidance, and I knew this was the moment that would define my role as a leader. I made the decision to secure a loan, a risk that many would have considered reckless, but I was confident that the business had the potential to recover and thrive. We used the loan to stabilize the company, hire the right people, and focus on scaling the business. It was a tense few months, but the risk paid off. Not only did the startup survive, but it became a major player in the tech industry. This experience taught me one of the most important lessons in my journey. Risk is an essential part of growth. Without it, there would be no reward. But risk isn't about taking blind chances. It's about calculated decisions, trust in your instincts, and the resilience to bounce back when things go wrong. As I continued to grow my portfolio of investments, I also began to venture into real estate. I started small, purchasing properties in up-and-coming areas, making strategic improvements, and selling them for a profit. Each property taught me more about the market, about timing, and about the value of patience. It was a slow process, but with each successful sale, I could feel myself becoming more confident, more capable. And yet, despite all the progress, I knew that I still had a long way to go. Every new venture, every deal, every success was just a stepping stone towards something bigger. I had learned to think strategically, to take risks, and to trust in my abilities. But I also realized that I needed to continue growing not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, and as a leader. It was a few years after that first major investment in the startup, and I had begun to feel the momentum of my efforts. My investments were growing, my businesses were thriving, and my reputation as someone who could make strategic decisions had begun to take shape. But even with all of this success, something deep within me knew that this wasn't the end of my journey. It was just the beginning. The challenge now wasn't about proving myself to others. It was about proving to myself that I could scale my efforts, step into uncharted territory, and make a lasting impact. As I looked at the businesses I had invested in, I realized that true success wasn't about the wealth I had accumulated. It was about building something sustainable that could outlast me. I wanted to create something that would not only change my life but also make a difference for others, something bigger than myself. I made the decision to shift my focus toward impact-driven businesses, those that could not only generate wealth but also contribute positively to society. I turned my attention to clean energy and sustainable agriculture, two industries I had been studying and believed held immense potential for growth in the coming decades. At first, the idea seemed daunting. Both industries were competitive, and many seasoned investors had already claimed their stake. But instead of being intimidated, I saw it as an opportunity to innovate, to disrupt the status quo. I began reaching out to innovators in these fields, collaborating with engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs who shared my vision of a more sustainable future. One particular project stood out to me, new technology for solar energy storage. That promised to make solar power more affordable and accessible to the masses. The company was still in its early stages, but the technology had the potential to change the energy landscape. It was a risky investment, but I believed in the team, in their mission, and in the impact this technology could have. I poured a significant portion of my resources into this project, betting on the long-term benefits. It wasn't an easy ride. There were setbacks along the way, moments when the technology wasn't working as expected, and times when it felt like we were on the verge of failure. But my experience had taught me the value of persistence. We pressed on, refining the technology, securing additional funding, and building partnerships with large energy companies. After years of hard work, the breakthrough finally came. The solar energy storage system became commercially viable, and the company began to scale rapidly. As the technology gained traction, we expanded globally, offering affordable and sustainable energy solutions to underserved communities around the world. It wasn't just a profitable venture, it was a chance to leave a legacy, to make a real impact on the world. It was during this period that I began to reflect on how far I had come. From being the maid who played chess in a wealthy family's living room to becoming the founder of a billion-dollar company that was changing the energy industry, I had come a long way. But even with all of the success, I knew that there was always more to learn, more to give, and more to achieve. But the most significant change was in the way I viewed success. It was no longer about the money. It was no longer about proving anyone wrong. Success to me had become about empowering others, creating opportunities, and making the world a better place. I had learned that the true power of wealth lies not in the accumulation of resources, but in the impact those resources can have on the lives of others. And with that realization, I made another bold decision to start a foundation that would focus on providing education, healthcare, and entrepreneurship opportunities for young people in underserved communities around the world. The foundation would not only give back to society, but also empower the next generation of leaders to create their own paths to success. As the years passed, I had built a vast network of businesses, investments, and partnerships. My journey had brought me from the unknown to becoming a self-made billionaire. But despite everything I had accomplished, I found myself asking, what's next? I had the wealth, the recognition, and the success, but something inside me still felt unfulfilled. I realized that while financial success had given me the freedom to live the life I wanted, it wasn't the only thing that mattered. There was still so much more I could give. I spent much of my time reflecting on the purpose behind my journey. I thought back to when I was still working as a maid, when I felt invisible. I thought about how, in that moment, no one could have possibly imagined that I would go on to build the empire I had. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about creating opportunities for others, especially those who, like me, had been overlooked and underestimated. That's when I realized that true leadership wasn't about being the richest person in the room or having the most power. It was about inspiring others to rise, to believe in themselves, and to achieve greatness, just as I had. One of the greatest challenges I faced during this period was scaling my impact. I had seen how my investments in clean energy had begun to change lives, but I realized that there were millions of others who still didn't have access to the opportunities that I had been fortunate enough to receive. The young people in underprivileged communities had the potential to change the world, but they lacked the resources and support. So I made a pivotal decision. I turned my attention to creating an ecosystem for young entrepreneurs, a space where they could develop their ideas, get funding, and learn from mentors who had walked the same path. I envisioned a network that would bring together young, passionate innovators, offering them the tools they needed to succeed. It wasn't an easy task. There were moments when I doubted whether I could pull it off. But my vision was clear, and I was determined to make it a reality. I partnered with educational institutions, nonprofits, and other like-minded individuals who shared my belief in the power of entrepreneurship to transform lives. Together, we built an incubator for young entrepreneurs, offering resources like startup capital, mentorship, and access to a global network of investors and business leaders. In the early stages, we faced many challenges. There were countless startups that failed, ideas that didn't take off, and moments of frustration. But with every setback, we learned, adapted, and grew stronger. The ecosystem we created began to gain traction, and soon we saw the first wave of entrepreneurs who had started their journeys with us young people, who had turned their dreams into businesses, who were creating jobs, and who were now giving back to their communities. It wasn't long before I realized that I was no longer the center of attention in my own story. The entrepreneurs we had helped were now the ones making headlines, starting movements, and changing industries. The impact I had always dreamed of was becoming a reality. But leadership isn't just about creating opportunities. It's about empowering others to lead. I found immense joy in watching these young entrepreneurs evolve into leaders themselves, passing on the lessons they had learned to the next generation. They were no longer waiting for opportunities. They were creating them. This was the moment when I truly understood the power of legacy. The businesses I had built, the investments I had made, and the companies I had nurtured were important. But what mattered most was the ripple effect they created. The impact on communities, on families, and on the lives of people I would never meet. That's what made all the struggles, all the sacrifices, worthwhile. As I stood at the forefront of this new chapter, I realized that success isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. It's about the people you meet along the way, the lives you touch, and the legacy you leave behind. I had spent my entire life focused on building wealth, but I had learned that the true reward of success isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you uplift, the opportunities you create, and the impact you have on the world. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. From a young woman with little more than a desire to break free from the life I was born into, to a self-made billionaire who's now standing at the helm of multiple companies with a global impact. I've learned that success is not a straight line. It's a series of choices, sacrifices, and moments of uncertainty, each one a stepping stone towards something greater. My story isn't just about the money I made or the empire I built. It's about the transformation that took place within me. It's about becoming the person I needed to be in order to succeed, not just in business but in life. And in the process, I discovered that the greatest achievement is not the wealth you accumulate, but the lives you change along the way. As I continued to build my businesses and invest in transformative technologies, I started to see something bigger than just financial success. I began to understand that true fulfillment comes from knowing that your efforts will continue to bear fruit long after you're gone. It's about creating something that outlasts you, something that lives beyond your own story. One of the most powerful moments in this journey came when I received a letter from one of the young entrepreneurs I had mentored. She had started with little more than an idea, and after working hard with the resources and support from our ecosystem, she had built a thriving business that was now changing the lives of hundreds of people. The letter she wrote wasn't just a thank you, it was a reminder of why I had started this journey in the first place. She had passed on the lessons I had given her, and now she was passing them on to others. The ripple effect had begun. I could have stayed in my comfortable position, enjoying the wealth and recognition that came with my success. But instead, I chose to push forward, to give back in a way that would create lasting change. I chose to be the mentor, the leader, and the force for good in the world that I had once needed. That decision turned out to be the most rewarding one I ever made. By the time I fully realized the impact of my actions, the wealth and accolades had become secondary. What truly mattered was the foundation we had built for the next generation of leaders. The young entrepreneurs who had once been where I was unsure, uncertain, and without resources were now the ones shaping industries, leading with integrity, and building businesses that made a difference. One of my proudest moments came when I looked at the young woman who had invited me to that chess game all those years ago. I thought back to how I was once just a maid in a house, underestimated and unseen. Today I was sitting at a boardroom table with my team, discussing a new initiative to bring clean energy to remote parts of the world. I had come full circle. The woman who once played chess as a joke had now become a leader whose decisions could change the world. I knew that none of this would have been possible without the people who took a chance on me, the millionaire who first saw my potential, the entrepreneurs who believed in their own dreams, and the countless individuals who trusted me to guide them. I couldn't have done it alone. Success, after all, is a team effort. As I stand here today, looking out at the world we've built, I am proud not just of the businesses we've created or the wealth we've amassed, but of the legacy we've forged. We have built something that goes beyond profits. We have created opportunities, changed lives, and empowered others to rise. The journey from that humble maid to a self-made billionaire was long and difficult, but it was worth every step. The most powerful lesson I've learned is that success is not about how much you have, it's about what you do with what you've been given. It's about how you use your resources to empower others and make a meaningful difference in the world. That, in the end, is what truly defines success. Now, as I continue to mentor the next generation, I am reminded that every decision, every challenge, and every victory is part of a larger story. And as I look ahead, I know that the best is yet to come.